I'm Garrett McCaffrey, and this is the SwimSwam podcast. With us today is the newly named associate head coach of the Auburn Tigers, Mr. Vlad Polyakov. Vlad, thank you so much for making the time today, and congratulations on the new gig.
Thanks, Garrett. Thanks for the intro. I felt like I just walked in a big room.
The toughest question probably right off the bat that some people might have in mind, because a lot of us remember you as the best breaststroker in the NCAA for a stretch for Alabama. And if I would have asked you back in that 2004, 2007 range, when you were competing for Alabama, that one day you would be the associate head coach at Auburn, what do you think you would have said back then?
I probably think they were crazy. We were trained, and if anybody knows the rivalry between Auburn and Alabama, it was always personal. It was beyond that. But looking back at it, I have to say that while competing against Auburn, I think that's what made me better as an athlete at the time. I always looked up. If you remember, those years when I first showed up as a freshman at Alabama, Auburn had a legion of breaststrokers. And I kind of set that my goal to, if there's anything I could do best for my team is I have to win my events. I have to be better. And when you talk about guys like, Mark Gangloff and, graduated at the time, Dave Denniston, and, at the time was Justin Karen, Will Brandt. I mean, those guys were beasts, competing. Pat Calhoun, the guy I had to modify my pullouts for, those guys were beasts, and I knew I had to step up and, compete on that level with them. So there was a lot of respect on top of, you could call it hatred. So when I look at it from that perspective, if somebody was to ask me a quick question about ever being a coach at Auburn, as a youngster at the time, I would say no. But if I put a little bit more thought and experience into it now and thinking about the names of coaches and the athletes and the kind of tradition that Auburn was, I think it would have changed quickly. I was always a pretty rational guy. So if you set me down and kind of give me that perspective, I think it would change quickly. So
let's talk about how things have changed. Obviously, you went on and had great success there for Alabama, and then internationally, all the way through 2012, and then you've been coaching and on the deck competing for a program that has passed Alabama at Auburn. With all the success that you and Arthur and everybody at Louisville have had, that had to be a good seat for what makes good college programs, for what the college scene has done over the last few years. How is the impression that probably never going to happen and now evolved into a place where you can recognize that this is the best thing for you professionally in your career and for your family too, personally?
Well, first of all, I'll start with Arthur, right? So Arthur, if some people still don't know the story, Arthur was my first college coach. He recruited me to Alabama. He kind of showed me the path, and I always had great coaches. Michael Loberg was my club coach, and he was kind of my eye-opener to high-level swimming at the time. And then Arthur really kind of bridged that gap. It was really with Arthur my freshman year, finishing second NCAAs to Brennan Hansen, just really kind of shocked my world. And really that's the mentality we've always had with Arthur, shock the world. It was bringing in the guys that, were humble and hungry and ready to go to work and just prove everybody wrong, and of course it sounds exciting, but it's not as simple as it looks. And it takes a lot of years of, building that culture. And it took us, it was funny when Arthur brought me to Louisville after, he coached me my first year at Alabama. Then it was a long stretch, obviously, 9 years until I reunited with him at Louisville. And he brought me back and he said, "Hey, we have some unfinished business." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Hey, at Alabama, we wanted to be top 10 and we finished 12th. And I remember we got our main relay disqualified that qualified for the final. And that would have easily put us in top 10 at the time. But he's like, "Hey, we just finished top 10 here at Louisville. That was 2012. Help us be top 5. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. I got so excited, and I came to Louisville. I didn't realize not one bit how hard that task was going to be and what it was going to entail. And, it took us a whole generation of athletes, right? It took us 4 years of a group to go through until we can build that culture and then establish that into the next group on the men's side. We certainly were able to do it with the women, and the culture was there, but also going pretty quickly from the 22nd when we got there to in 3 years to jumping to 6th, and then maintaining that was pretty fun. So when this opportunity presented itself, I thought, wow, the years early on, watching Auburn, watching that undefeated team, they had undefeated dual meet record. They had undefeated, they went for a stretch of titles, Dave Marsh, legendary coach. So just kind of thinking about that and saying, hey, what if, I love that process of rebuilding the program or building the program at Louisville. And I was thinking, what if we can do that at Auburn? That would be really cool, and so when Ryan called me and kind of shared his vision, I thought, why not? It was kind of the same mentality. And of course, the main challenge was thinking of, but wait a minute, what about Louisville here? And that was that kept me awake at night for a whole week, while making that decision. So.
Yeah, that had to be pretty tough with all that, you've helped contribute to and the success, and now knowing how hard it is. And I think that's what it looks like from the outside has changed. The college swimming scene has changed, where it looked like, for a stretch it was Auburn and Texas, and then, Cal and Texas, and, the women's programs, going Georgia, Stanford, Cal, and it's those consistent top 5. Then you have, the other rotating, maybe 4 teams could fill in the top 5, but those 4 teams were pretty well set. And now with teams like Louisville, a combined program, like NC State really helped shake things up, and kind of was an out of, not a mid-major, but at least not necessarily one of the perennial top 10 teams. How has college swimming changed so that maybe it's a little bit more accessible for more teams, and how do you take advantage of that at Auburn?
Well, I think our world in terms of communication and the availability of information has changed as a whole. There's certainly a lot more information easily available. That could be good and bad. So how the coaches transfer that information to the athletes is very important. Team culture is essential. But I think also I look at it from, if you think of the best, most paid sports in NCAA, like college football, you also see some of the teams that have kind of broke the ranks. And I think the resources are there for all schools. They're available. So it's really comes down to, and honestly, there's a lot of talent out there now because of that information, because of the resources, and it's how you really communicate that and how you rally the troops, so to speak. How do you believe and get everybody together around the same goal? I think that's what it was about for us at Louisville. And like I said, there was some common goals and crazy challenges that we set. But I think that's how those programs are able to arise. It's great leadership, certainly. What Arthur's done at Louisville is unprecedented. There's no culture like that at Louisville. So, and it's here. This is what we did this year too, winning the first conference title, being top 5 for the second year in a row at Louisville has been, this is going to go down in history books forever. And that's going to be hard to beat for the next generations, right? So, and I think that's what it is, really. It's great leadership. It's about people understanding what needs to be done. And, just general competition level keeps rising. I think, it's no surprise to me, but it is true that those schools that have been there for a long time, they will circle back, and that's going to be challenges for the schools that are challenging them right now.
I want to get into that piece of the culture a little bit more and what makes a great coach and a great culture. But I kind of want to talk a little bit more about you as a swimmer before we get into that. And I got to assume that those Alabama teams probably didn't have the same culture as Louisville, didn't have that same group mentality, and you kind of had to do it on your own. What made you great as a swimmer?
Well, I don't want to I
We
don't want
want
to
you to
bash
brag.
anybody. I don't want to bash anybody on Alabama team. We had obviously great individuals, and we had I had a good group of guys. Unfortunately, there was only about 4 or 5 of them that kind of understood that level of performance that we needed to reach, that could challenge themselves to be there. Unlike Auburn at the time, where I feel like every athlete knew exactly what they needed to do and what they were up against. It was always a goal of ours, every year to have a competitive relay, at least one. And it was medley relay. That's the best we can puzzle together. And honestly, the guys stepped up and we contended as much as we could. We even beat Auburn one time on the medley relay, my senior year. That was a highlight. It was big time. But really, yes, it was about, I think when Arthur recruited me to Alabama and Don Wagner at the time as a coach, we had a clear goal and clear vision. We wanted to be top 10. Even in the recruiting, that was the conversation. So coming in, I knew who I was up against. I was always very competitive. So my number one goal was to beat all the guys on the team. Anybody who I could beat on breaststroke, I had to do that. That was the first goal. And the second, and just being very competitive and not being afraid to challenge those guys, but also very respectful, realizing that, hey, I love to compete. I love to win, but at the same time, hey, be the first one to shake their hand and appreciate the fact that they got you better, as a teammate. So that was the thing. I mean, at the time, you maybe remember Apostolos Sagarakis was our sprinter from Greece. So we had the finisher, we had the breaststroke. We always kind of, looked for a butterfly in the backstroker. But again, the guys found the way, and we try to stay competitive. But that was certainly not the culture that we're able to build here in Louisville. And again, it took time. It took time, and everybody to understand that everybody plays a key role. Even the bottom guy, his job is to make sure that the next guy is on his toes, that he's always trying to be better. So that's kind of the mentality. So as a swimmer, I think it's important to be competitive. It's important to really look for every possible way to be the best that you can be. I always appreciated that. And to me, if anybody knows my story, I wasn't always the best guy. I just kind of always tried to fight my way through. And thankfully in college, it came to fruition, almost unexpected, honestly. And I think Arthur played a key role in that as well.
Did you learn to fight harder or fight smarter?
I learned to fight smarter in club when I first arrived I arrived from Kazakhstan at the time, and Michael is the one, I don't know if anybody knows Michael Loberg, but he was one of the first guys that created the lactate testing for swimmers. He would pull it from the ear with a little tube. And so he would, I showed up and we did our first lactate test, basically 2 400s that you swim. And I would do them both. Well, first one's freestyle, second one's breaststroke. And your job is to go as fast as you can, as easy as you can. So produce minimum possible lactate at the fastest possible time in the 400. So for those sprinters would hate it, obviously, they would just do whatever. And, for me, my first one, I go and I just beat everybody in the 400. It was awesome. I get out, I'm so proud. I'm like, hey, look, I beat her. I'm 15 years old. I get out and, Michael draws my blood and it's like 8.9 lactate. And I look at him, I was like, that's good, right? And he's like, you're an idiot. And he was a German guy, pretty straightforward with a smile on his face. And the last thing I wanted to be is an idiot in front of, Michael's eyes. So I made sure that I understood what I was doing next time. And that helped me figure out what really I needed to do. So that was probably 2 years leading up to college. So, and Michael was always there, kind of a guiding force in terms of like, hey, things are going to get exciting in college. You're going to get competitive. You're going to do, but know when to do it and when to train. Training is training, competing is competing. And I learned that pretty quickly. And I took it with me. And of course, there's still times when I just had to go, and I think everybody does. Every competitor feels that. But I think most of the time, as long as I dedicated training to my training in the proper way, things worked out.
All right. So this next one is a transition question, because your swimming career kind of arched right through the suit era. And I think that just is a change in our sport. I think it will be a benchmark for our sport in a lot of ways. So how did swimming change in that stretch? And I have to believe that helps impact your coaching philosophy too.
Yeah. As an athlete, it rocked my world. I wasn't ready for it. I was always a technician in my swimming. I believed in, like you said, smart training from that point on, from early high school days. And I worked on my technique, on efficiency in swimming, on all of the above. And I felt like when the swimsuits came around, it became so competitive, so quick. It brought the depth up so fast, and it created a lot of it brought a lot of confidence to the athletes that were kind of below so quickly. And as an athlete, I just wasn't ready for it. I remember the first meet we showed up and everybody suited up. It was in Missouri, actually, in February of 2008. Everybody put on the Speedo laser.
I was there, Vlad. I was there.
Yeah, there you go. And I just got rocked. I didn't improve. My improvement was minimal. I wasn't shaved, but I was like, everybody just went 212. And 212 was like monumental. Like it wasn't, you can just get up and go 212. And I was like, wow, what's happening? Did these guys really get that fast? And how do I get there, if I'm not quite there yet? So I started thinking a lot. And then, in 2008, going to Beijing, and the goal at Beijing for me personally, since I was, fifth in 2004, I wanted to get a medal. That was a dream of mine, certainly for my country. That would have been a great achievement. But that didn't happen. And, I ended up being eliminated in the semifinal, but more importantly, the results just were outrageously fast. And I just still couldn't put my mind to it. I couldn't evolve fast enough to the suit to understand what was happening. In 2009, obviously the rubber suits came out and that elevated the results to a whole nother level. And I was sort of on par with that. I started figuring out that thing. I remember the comment from one of the European swimmers was, hey, the suit is like a Ferrari. You just need to know how to drive it. So I started figuring out how to drive the Ferrari. But I took it back on training. I started training less, and that paid a toll eventually down the stretch. So with all that dabbling and obviously getting older, and the competition kept getting tougher and steeper, and that just eventually I realized I didn't have the resources to compete, both financially and in a way. So I kind of switched to age group coaching at the time, and then slowly, actually, by complete surprise, after 2012, Arthur offered me that opportunity at Louisville, which I'm so grateful for.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now I don't want to fast forward, and as deep as you want to get into it, what makes you a great coach? And I don't want you to have to assume I'm going to give you that title as a great coach, but I think it's pretty well stated, as you are now the associate head coach of Auburn. That's, you've reached a level of greatness as a coach. Help us understand what makes you great at this.
Well, thank you, and I certainly appreciate it. I'm far from great. I've been around great ones and athletes and coaches as well. So I like to think of myself as a good learner. That's something I always valued, is just be able to, like I said, that lesson of slow evolution during the suit era. Actually, it hurt me more because I wasn't able to adapt, because I always prided myself in the fact that I could get information, and I was not only able to retain it, but then kind of dissolve it and spread it to everybody else to help them understand what's going on. So I think as a coach, I value that. I value the ability to connect with the athletes and spend time with them, and to see what are their goals, what are they trying to do, and then eventually help them get there, be a part of that journey with them, and really facilitate that task. Because I think that's what a lot of great coaches have done for me. They just made that easier. They made that information easily available for me, so I can digest it and put it together to work. Sometimes the good coach will give you a kick in the butt when you get complacent. So those are the things that I value, and again, I think it's important to be able to connect with your athletes and really listen to them. And then if you truly do, and hopefully their goals are a match with you, because for us, it's always about, great expectations. We'll always look for, we're not trying to, certainly at Louisville, we weren't trying to just, shock the world instantly. We always understood that was a process. So it was always about partnering with our athletes and just kind of helping them along their path. And the faster we can help them get there, the sooner, they will adapt, and they'll get more and more excited. And at some point it just becomes self-revolving. They just keep, then hopefully you don't like, as a coach, you don't like behind, and you're just there, to help them along the way.
Can you dive a little bit deeper into that, listening to your athletes, and give me an example over the past year? Because at Louisville, you guys had a terrific year on the men's side too. Can you give me just one example of a way that you listen to an athlete and you learn something as a coach?
Well, yeah. And I think this is something we've done also great at Louisville. It's always been an individual approach, and we've never tried to put athletes in the box. And I think that's where Ryan and I are very similar in our mentalities, how we're going to take this approach. It was always about team coaching. We didn't want, an athlete certainly to get also boxed in completely with just one coach. The ideas and how they flow, they should be fluid. Everybody should be on the same page, but at the same time, it's important for athletes to hear other coaches speak. So that was kind of an important thing. But certainly, if you look at last year's progression that we've had on the men and then the very young women's class that, obviously had a lot of challenges through COVID, I think we have improved drastically. And a lot of it had to do with adapting the training philosophy, certainly for sprint and for people understanding their roles. So there was a group of guys that trained and didn't really respond to heavy aerobic zone training. So they needed to recline on that. And really it was a lot of individual meetings and a lot of individual kind of understanding of each person, where they're at, and finding that kind of common ground together and helping them achieve that. If you look at some of these guys that improved, I mean, I'll throw some names like Michael Eastman, Tanner Cummings, the guys from Bowling Green, Kentucky, Louisville, Kentucky, being on NCAA, All-American relay. That was just absurd. Guys splitting 41.9, 42 flat, 19.4 flat start. These guys were 21s out of high school. It's absurd. And I think a lot of it was, yes, they're super competitive and they've learned how to be performing at that high level, but also I think it was about partnering with them. Certainly on the women's side too, Kaylee Wheeler, she's a breaststroker, and I worked obviously hands-on with breaststrokers at Louisville. And, we try to work with her through a traditional kind of style. We did, there's some longer breaststroke sets, but she didn't seem to respond to those at all. So we kind of flipped the switch and went kind of full sprint for her, with almost like a tendency to like 50 freestyle sprint and a lot of strength work. And she just, exploded on that. But then, there's the other athletes that need completely the opposite. Kelsey was kind of that example when she was put in sprint early on. It backfired, so we had to go the other way, and she needed some supplemental aerobic work. So it's always about kind of that approach. But I think this time during COVID, we had a lot more time to sit down and certainly have these Zoom meetings or whatever, that took to listen to our athletes. And it was a difficult time, not only from, coaching standpoint, but really psychological standpoint, I think, for all of us. So really spending time and listening to them was very important.
Yeah. I guess the next question, that I have is it's going back to Louisville as well. And you've already touched on Arthur and, how big a part of your path he has been. If you had to kind of narrow it down and simplify it, and I know that that's really tough to do with such a, dynamic person and, huge impactful figure, but what makes Arthur so great?
Arthur does not set limits for anyone. He's the kind of guy, it's like you walk in his office and somebody crazy, will say like, hey, Art, and this would be an athlete that's just kind of starting or just got into the programs, like, coach, I want to win NCAAs. And Arthur would be like, okay, how are we going to get there? Let's sit down and see how that's possible, and you just feel like, wow, really? I thought it was impossible, but I was just kind of throwing it out there. And I think he's like that with people. With anyone, and he's there. He's there. He will go to fight for you. He will go to battle for you, for your athletes, for your coaches. That's what makes him great. He's just all in, and he's also, if I should say that, he's also a no BS kind of guy. So he could say it like it is, and you respect that. You just kind of say, if Arthur says it, must be true kind of thing. And you always listen to him. And honestly, Arthur's like a family to me after so many years. I could talk about him all day. Clearly, one of the greatest coaches of our time. And what makes him really amazing, I think he's super humble. He will never brag about himself. But that was always the hardest thing in recruiting. I had to sit there and talk about him. I'm like, this is because he wouldn't say a word. He just kind of like, and if he says it, it would be because we made him and it would come out awkward. So he would just ignore it. But, certainly what I learned from him throughout these years is going to live with me, I think, more than just as a coach, but as a person. He's just an incredible person, husband, dad, three of their kids, obviously, as you may know, been tremendously successful. Both Nick is still finishing up his career. Gabby's got probably 4 more years of eligibility. Stefan went and was part of the program, and and he was not he didn't have the swimmer beginnings like Gabby and Nick did, but still had left a pretty tremendous impact. Was a very respected team member for us. Graduated with business degree. Does really well in life right now. So it's to be successful on every level like that. That's I guess I should say Arthur leads by example, right? That's the only thing you could ask from a coach.
Well, as a dad now, how did you see that affect him, coaching the kids like that? Like, how is it different? How is that challenge affecting him, even if he wasn't letting the kids, athletes, or his biological children see it? How do you think he was balancing that? What has to be? I mean, you can only imagine with kids how hard that would be. How did that affect him?
Oh, it was so hard for him. This is the first year this year when Nick won 200 fly that I saw some real emotion out of him. Like, and I said, you know what? I actually talked to him and said, Art, you need to show it. Like, this is the time. It was that, it started, I think, maybe at conference, but in NCAAs, I'm like, you need to show emotion, because you would see him, if you go and rewind every time that Nick won the 2 fly at conference, in some tremendous fashion. Like, I mean, he beat Andreas Vazaios, like he just did these crazy things. And Arthur would just stand there like, while when everybody else wins, he just goes ballistic. Arthur, he'll jump. I mean, we probably had the best staff in the, in terms of the vertical jump, because we just had that elevation. I'm bringing that to Auburn too, by the way. And, but that was the thing, to really show his emotion. And I thought that was a special moment. It's going to be special for Nick. It's going to be, and it's finally special for Arthur, but it's not over yet. And Arthur knows it. I just felt like that emotion. We all felt like Arthur needed to show that at this time, because it was, especially for how hard last year was, and Nick didn't have the opportunity to do it and to transfer to that. So I thought that was pretty cool. So I know it was hard for him, and it's going to be hard with Gabby. And it's so, the coaches are going to have to do a good job. And I think they are. Obviously, Steph and Lindy and Cam are going to do a phenomenal job with all the athletes. And, and I think that's what we've done great at Louisville, is really make sure that we cover each other as a staff. I think Ryan works in a similar way, just making sure that we all doing work. And I think that's what a great team has to be. I think this is where we as a coaching staff lead by example. When your teammate, is struggling, you fill in, you come in and you help. Nobody just sits there and kind of waits things out. We all play a big role.
How much does it help that you can, your new boss, Ryan, is kind of part of the same tree in some ways under Arthur, and understands that greatness and how to kind of carry forward with some of those same values? How helpful is that for the two of you?
I think it's awesome. That was part of the reason that kind of facilitated the decision for me, just knowing Ryan. I know Ryan's got a chip on his shoulder too. He wants to prove himself at Auburn. And when I like that kind of mentality, just coming in and saying, hey, we can do this. Ryan came in from obviously Ryan helped Louisville men's program be top 10 for the first time. That was his contribution. And he was part of the top 6 program in the women as well. That's when he left to Houston, and then to be 6-time conference champions that they were. So Ryan certainly understands the culture, and what it takes to build or rebuild the program. And I appreciate that. And I think, we're on the phone all the time already. My official day was Monday, so 2 days ago, or yesterday. So we're kind of on the phone all the time. He's probably texting me right now. But that's kind of just understanding that we all work together as a unit. We're working on our final member of the staff right now. So that's, taking the toll. Also connecting with all the kids currently on the team. That's very important. I had a lot of them reach out to me, which is really exciting for me to kind of jump into that process. But really just think, certainly working with Ryan's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah.
So the chip on the shoulder, what else? What else gets you excited, and what gives you hope that, Ryan can bring that success that you're hoping to build at Auburn as the leader of the program?
Well, I think the most evident fact is that Ryan was part of that culture. he was part of those guys. He swam with Cesar Cielo. He swam with Fred Bousquet. He was coached by David Marsh and David Durden. He understands what it takes, from that standpoint, the competitiveness it takes, right? I think, just kind of having that, knowing that experience. And, for us, even at Louisville here, winning that first conference title, I think all the guys are like, whoa, that was an amazing feeling. How do we do it again? And I think Ryan has that. And I feel it from day one, from our first conversation with him to even now his, first there was excitement. Now I was like, hey, let's get to work. But it never comes off as like, hey, everybody, let's work. It's always like, hey, I'm doing it. Let's go. Let's do it together. And I think that's a lot of fun. I think that culture, the fact that he was part of that definitely helps a lot. And he'll certainly transfer that through his energy, to all of us and the athletes as well.
So we started in the time machine at the very beginning, going back to 2006. Let's go fast forward to 2027 or 2028. And Auburn has just won a national championship. How did it happen?
Whew. Well, I think it starts with the team culture. I think it starts with making sure that the current athletes understand what we're trying to do and really finding the athletes that are like-minded, bringing in and recruiting the individuals that are brave, that are willing to go to work, and they're just excited to be Auburn, excited to really do this right. But meanwhile, just really have a lot of fun doing it. I think that's very important. That gets lost in the grind and the hard work. It's like, how do we just really enjoy and help each other just do something crazy again, and I think once that kind of escalates and it starts building and feeding off each other, I do think there's already a lot of talent at Auburn. I think it's going to take a lot of that, from us as a coaching staff to just help them understand that they can, that it is very much possible, but it will take some work and it will take a lot of fun doing it too. I had this funny quote when I was coaching age group. I said, I told to the kids, it's like, I don't know how it came up. One of the little kids made a comment and I was like, hey, I don't know what fun it is for you, but for me, it's winning. And I was totally kidding at the time, but it's kind of sounds hilarious. And winning is fun, and I think how we get there, certainly it's not going to happen overnight, but I like the idea of 6 years, it's bold. 6 years is bold, but it's possible, certainly with the culture that Auburn has. And of course, the alumni. What a tremendous network now, and what a culture. I mean, Rowdy Gaines, think about that. Like this kind of people that came in out of Auburn, Fred Bousquet, Cesar Cielo, Coach Marsh, Kirsty Coventry, Margaret Holzer. Like, wow. That's exciting. And I think with the help of that, and I love how Ryan said it, sitting on the shoulders of the giants, right? And just knowing that, hey, it's there for us to lean on, but now we have to restructure, readapt, and compete. I think compete is important.
Yeah. I mean, when I interviewed Ryan about this, he said that he felt like he had a really good number 2 in place that he couldn't wait to announce. And I think he does, Vlad. I really do. I think that you have the right experience. I have really enjoyed just, even these 40 minutes of being able to chat. And I can tell that you have good, authentic, backing with all of the things that you're trying to push for with that competitive drive that obviously helps you in the pool and now on deck. But as a fellow coach, I got to end with one more question, because obviously, like I just said, I'm all on board. I think Ryan has the right piece for Auburn in place, and I think that's going to be helpful for the success over the next 5 to 6 years. As a family man, and then we talked before we started recording, we've got 2 boys around the same age. I'm going to ask you a real tough question. What does success in 5 to 6 years for your family look like?
Great question. This move was also as much of a family move for us, for me and Mariah, as anything else that comes obviously with Auburn. And from what we know, Auburn's a tremendous family environment. It's a small town. My wife grew up in a small town, Big Pine Key, Florida. It's small town, not on football days, obviously, but most of the time it's a small town. And we kind of like that. I'm hoping that my kids, Liam and Max, can really, kind of hone in on that setting, grow in that culture. It happens to be Auburn now, and really just kind of learn in that environment. Hopefully learn from me too, because if I'm doing this right, if I'm leading the way, hopefully our family is stronger. Mariah is right now as a real estate agent. She's hoping to transfer that to Auburn as well. She always had a passion for swimming as well. She taught swimming, and hopefully she can kind of play with that and continue with that as well. But really just, like as any family, I think there's no complete formula of what it's going to look like in 6. I'm just hoping my kids are great men one day, right? So this is just, 6-7 years, that could be just a fundamental block, right, in their development. But what I hope to do is that they're part of a great culture, surrounded by great people. That's really my hope. And I know we had that at Louisville, and that's why Louisville is going to be really hard to leave. Certainly this is their home. It's always going to say in their, passport, birth certificate, Louisville, Kentucky, for those boys. So they're going to know where their home is. But I know that changing an environment for them is also a very beneficial thing. I've moved all around all my life. I think changes are good. And it just helps you grow. It helps you learn as well. At this stage, I don't know how much it's going to affect it, but the fact that they're going to know they did move when they were young, it's going to be really cool. And I'm excited for Mariah too. I think she's, she could be very successful in an Auburn setting. I think, she's starting to, finally the kids are a little bit older and she can get out from that setting. That's pretty much all she did. She's been a tremendous mom and covering me really to make this all possible. She's been my rock. She made this all happen for me to be able to be away and be with my second family, so to speak, and understand that. And now I think it's going to be almost probably a little bit better because she can get away and she can maybe even be a part of what we're building at Auburn.
That's awesome. Good stuff. Well, I wish you the best of luck, finishing out this summer season and then on to this next adventure and the big change. Vlad, I think they've got a great coach there at Auburn, so they should be lucky, and I hope you feel that appreciation there because they are lucky to have you, and I wish you nothing but the best of luck. Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much, Greg. Thank you guys. Thanks, SwimSwam.
You've been listening to the SwimSwam podcast. Stay tuned for new episodes every week. You can take SwimSwam podcast on the go by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Look for links in the description below, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos as well.